Welcome to my webinar. So you want to be a screenwriter, now what? Tips, tricks, and disciplines to help you pursue a screenwriting career in Hollywood. A screenwriter's life and the screenplay. Okay, now we move on to a screenwriter's life. It's a call of duty in the depths of hell. Now, screenwriters need the time to fail and write bad screenplays. It's true. Fall down 7 times, stand up 8, and act without expectation. It's okay to fail. This is where we learn. And now my top 10 questions for aspiring screenwriters. Do you have an artist's mentality? And what I mean is you'll need a bit of insanity as you stare into this dark void of the unknown so you can fight your fears. So it won't cripple you. You can actually start and finish a project and say, you know what, it's okay if it's not perfect. You'll need to withstand continued rejection, criticism, and failure. And sometimes you won't make any money. You have to have this burning passion as an artist. And if you're okay with all of this, you just might have what it takes. Now, have you mastered screenplay format and structure? As I mentioned before, it's what separates the amateur from the professional. I find many aspiring writers have a serious lack of knowledge about screenplay format. Producers, directors, and executives immediately will recognize if you don't have enough respect for your craft to know proper format that you're not a professional. It's going to harm you in the long run. Do you overwrite and micromanage the screenplay? We've talked about the overwriting before. You have to, less is more. Don't be afraid that they're not going to get it. This is not a novel that you're writing. It's a screenplay. It's precious real estate on that blank page. You only have so many pages to write a script. Do you respect the mountain you're climbing? It's another important one. Are you humble? Do you think you're going to, just overnight become a huge success? Or you realize you're going to have to work at this and write more than one screenplay? Are you willing to give the time necessary to create a viable body of work? Like I said, one script's not going to do it. It was my 5th spec that finally sold. So it's a long time for you to finally, find your voice and have the experience and confidence to know that you can be hired to write a screenplay and finish it on time. Are you constantly writing new material? This is vitally important. You're one script wonder, as I say. Sometimes I get a screenplay and I say, okay, this was good, but you have another one? I don't. Do you have any other ideas? Not really. I mean, if one script opens that door, you'd better have 3 or 4 to back it up. So what I'm saying is don't be too eager to get your material out there until you build sort of a solid body of work. Now, have you found your unique voice and passion for genre? We've talked about genre before. If you have a passion for a particular genre, it's going to drive you to learn that genre and become proficient. If you really love horror movies and that's what you want to write, then focus on that. Don't spend your time writing an action movie or something you think might sell. And are you humble and practice humility with confidence? I mean, this is important. Never consider yourself superior to your craft. You have to recognize those who went before you and learn from them. If you can find a mentor, it's fantastic. A screenwriter who's been in the business for a while, who would take you under the wing. You're carving out a screenwriting career is like climbing your own Mount Everest, and you will be humbled at the enormity of the journey. And if you're not humble, the business will quickly humble you by how long it takes to get anything done or reach any level of success. And number 10, are you patient? You must be patient because this is a long-haul journey. You can't be in it for the short run and think that overnight you're going to be a success. As I said, it was 6 years after graduating film school for me before I was able to achieve my first professional screenwriting job. So it's a long-haul journey. And now my top 10 daily disciplines of a screenwriter. Act like a professional in all interactions. I don't care what you're doing, who you're meeting with. You act like a professional even if they are not. This is how you build your reputation. It means turning in projects when you say that you're going to turn them in, which builds your integrity. Even if you agree to read someone's screenplay, read it. Don't be like the others where they say, I've been so busy, 6 months later they haven't read it. Read it. That builds your integrity. Number 2, learn your strengths and weaknesses. I've discussed this before about your voice and your ability. If you're not strong in structure, focus on that. If dialogue's your strength, then continue to work on that, but learn where your strong suit lies in screenwriting. You have to fire on all cylinders to create a great screenplay and to be a competent writer. And that includes your stamina. Can you write for 6 to 8 hours a day? Can you write, even if you have a day job, can you find the time to stay on schedule without missing days of writing, keeping your writing schedule. Number 3, build a professional reputation as a team player and collaborator. I mentioned this before. I cannot mention it enough. This is daily discipline. And, when you get those notes, you want to get them back and say, yes, I understand. And you have to be the person, the go-to person for the producers and executives and director, that they trust you implicitly and they want to keep you around, which means you're going to be on every draft and hopefully through the production process, and your name is the only name that's on the credits, written by. Number 4, carve out a writing schedule and a place to write. I mentioned this before about how important it is, your location, your environment for writing, and also the daily schedule. There's going to be forces of procrastination and distraction that want to keep you from writing. You have to fight against those. Shut off the internet. Close the door. Tell your family, I can't do it right now. I have to have an hour to myself. You need this. Number 5, empower yourself by doing your homework. This means reading screenplays. This means seeing movies, and also reading the trade papers and different internet sites that you can learn about the film business and what's going on, keeping up to date about your business, what's selling out there. Number 6, detach from the work and the outcome. As I mentioned before, it's extremely important not to take things personally. It's film making, it's a business, it's Hollywood. So you choose your battles wisely. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but the ultimate idea is get the project made and move on to the next one. Number 7, take responsibility for your career. Do not be a victim and blame others. Well, the agent just didn't understand it, or the producer is an idiot. The producer who has 100 credits is an idiot, right? Okay, who's the idiot? Take responsibility. Do something every day to push your career that step closer to a reality. If you're not doing that, you can only look in the mirror and blame yourself. You can't blame others. Number 8, take chances and don't be afraid to fail. I mentioned this before. Failure, it happens. And we learn from it, and we brush ourselves off, and we get up and we do it again, so that the next time the failure won't be quite as bad. But even when, screenplays are purchased, many times they're not made. When I first started writing, I thought everything that I wrote I would sell. Well, I've had 14 assignment jobs, and not every one of those screenplays went on to production for a myriad of reasons. Economics, they lost the actor, foreign buyers are not buying this type of genre, whatever. So don't be afraid of failure, and don't be afraid to take chances. Number 9, practice humility. It's very important to be humble on this journey. If not, you will be humbled. And number 10, be patient. As I mentioned before, it's vital to your journey. It's a lifelong journey, or damn close to it. But if you're busy studying your craft, writing screenplays, and you have multiple projects in the marketplace, you won't have time to sit there and be impatient. You have to realize this is a long process, and you have to be in it for the long haul. So, be patient. Now you say, how do you train for the Screenwriter's Marathon? Well, this concept of the long haul or the marathon, because the success doesn't happen overnight. As I mentioned, it was 6 years out of film school before I had my first professional writing job. One script does not make a writer, but 10 might. And it might take you 5 to catch up to speed. Where I mentioned before, you find your voice, you find your ability, and your confidence. So you have to start with one, and usually the first one is the hardest. And do you have what it takes to hunker down over the long haul, and create multiple projects? Like I said, if you're not doing the work, then you have no one else to complain to. It's your fault. It's not anyone else's fault. And you have to learn how to handle rejection, criticism, and failure. You can't take it personally, and you'll see the results as you get better. The criticism sometimes will be less, and sometimes it'll be more. It'll be shocking. I've turned in screenplays where I was blown away by the notes, the extent of the notes. I thought, were we on the same page? I wrote the script from a treatment that we agreed to, and suddenly it's a whole different experience. So you have to learn how to, not let that knock you on your butt, and take you out of commission. And the discipline to write every day, and know that everything that you write will not be seller produced. You got to carve out that writing time. Usually I do about 5 pages a day when I'm writing an assignment, and that's a feature in 20 days. One time I had to do 26 pages in 24 hours. That was a nightmare because I was on page 75 and the producer called and said, "Hey, I want to give the script to the investors." I said, "Oh, great. They're coming to town tomorrow." I said, "Well, I'm on page 75. He said, "Well, do you think you could get it finished?" Yeah. Stayed up all night. Would never do that again. You have to master the ability to execute those notes to stay on a project. Otherwise, you will be fired and they'll bring on another writer. And I've done this a few times where I've become the script doctor and I've interfaced and dealt with the director because they needed the script to move quickly through the development process into production. So they gave the writer a second chance, a third chance, and the notes weren't being executed, and so they just had to let the writer go. That's not where you want to be. You want to be the writer who stays on the project. So, is on the set where you can learn and observe and be part of, the community where they just don't take the script from you and say, "See you later." I mean, you're actually on the set, which I've done on-set rewrites. I've been on the set of most of the films that I've had produced, luckily, because I've had this good relationship with the producers, and then they turn me over to the director, and then I work with the director, and I realize it's my job to help the director do his or her job, and make that job as easy as possible. It's not about me anymore. It's about the script. It's about the project. And so if you think in those terms, it won't be shocking when you experience the realities of film production or the filmmaking business. So start training now with your specs for the time when you do get hired professionally. So it's time to take your first Hollywood meeting. I remember my first meeting. I was so excited, and I didn't know that there were various types of Hollywood meetings. I thought, well, you have a meeting, you get a job, right? But there's different types of meetings. There's the general meeting, where it's just a meet and greet, put a name to a face, and they just want to see what you're doing, and they'll keep you in their files and in their minds. There's the pitch meeting, of course. You go into pitch project, which most likely they will not buy, and then you offer them something else, and they say, keep in touch. Then there's the moving forward meeting, where they actually buy your script or option it, and they're moving forward in the process. And then there's the notes meeting after you start writing the screenplay, and then you meet for the criticism, about the script and start executing the notes. But the key with the meetings is that you have to show up early, and always come prepared. That's one of the things that, you can't change a bad first impression. So you can blow your opportunity from the second they meet you. So you want to show up early. They're going to make you wait, which is okay, but don't you be late, because it also is going to reflect upon your professionalism. So are they going to consider, God, this writer was late half an hour without even a phone call? What's going to happen when we hire the writer to actually do something? Are they going to be late turning the script in? It starts their mind, wandering and wondering about you. So you have to research the credits and the background of your contact. Do your homework. Google them. Look at some of their credits. Watch a movie. They're going to appreciate and respect that you took the time to find out about their background. You probably may not have any credits, so there's nothing to find out. But if you come in and say, hey, I really liked your movie and that one scene, or you can talk about your project and say, this is very similar to this kind of, you have a reference point, and they're going to love it. And you're showing confidence and your ability to be a professional. Now in the meeting, look for red flags. If a producer badmouths other writers and complains about how they hate to pay writers, that's not a good sign. Look for these little red flags and listen closely how, their attitude toward writers or their attitude toward the work process. Is it going to be a nightmare if you're going to be hired and have to work with this producer, or is it going to be a fairly easy job? If it's a nightmare, they're never going to blame themselves. They're going to blame you. You were difficult. They're never difficult in their mind. Now, sometime after the meeting, maybe a week later, send a thank you card to the person that you met to show your gratitude and remind them gently of you. Most people today pay no attention to the small details. It's very old school to send a handwritten card. That's why it's important. And the executive assistants sort the incoming mail, and they put the handwritten notes above the other mail. So it's read first. So when the producer's busy with 1,000 distractions, they open the card and you're a nice blip on their radar. And it shows that you appreciate the meeting and that you're a professional. So it's a good thing. Remember to send a thank you card after a meeting. And it's also important, if you can, to find a screenwriting mentor and apprentice with a veteran filmmaker. I've been lucky to work with Academy Award winning producers, veteran directors, and actors who've been nominated for Academy Awards and Golden Globes and Emmys. And the one thing that I was able to do when I was working with them is observe and study and ask questions. And some of the directors actually have become my mentors. They've taken me under their wing, and I ask them, career advice, creative advice. I have them read things. We've actually worked on things together. It's great to find a mentor and to be a mentor. It's a way of giving back if you reach a certain level in the business of experience. And you can become a writer's assistant to learn too, and get into the writer's room in like a TV show, TV series, and offer help and ask for help. That's it goes both ways. And a mentor is a great way to build these vital relationships. Trust me, these directors that I've worked with, several of them are personal friends now, and we've worked on projects together, and I can go to them anytime because they have 40 years of experience, twice the amount I have. And you're building those relationships, and then when you need help or they need help, it's a great resource. And like I said, you have to pay it forward. Once you reach a level in the business where you have enough experience and enough success, reach down and do someone a favor. If it's reading a screenplay for free, giving notes, working on a project, opening a door by making a phone call, whatever it is. But you can find a screenwriting mentor, usually with a professional screenwriter, who could potentially pay you an hourly wage or allow you to come into the world and go to meetings and learn, priceless information that way as being an assistant. Now, once you start working professionally as a screenwriter and getting paid, you're going to have to learn how to budget your money, because if you've had a day job before, you get a weekly paycheck or every 2 weeks, but it's not quite the same when you're working as a screenwriter. There are the step deal payments, which means you get a little bit of money up front and then money for every draft, and the rest of the money if and only if and when the movie goes into production. Usually on the first day of production, you get the rest of the money. So many times the movie doesn't go into production, you've been paid to write the scripts, and now you're sitting there without a job and hardly any money. So you have to learn how to weather the storm, the slow periods and the periods when you're making a good deal of money. Unless you're on a TV series, that runs 5 years, that's a different story. So my advice is to always live below your means. If you're making $100,000 a year, don't live like you're making $150,000 a year. Live like you're making $75,000 a year. It's going to take that pressure off from you to have to sell something, to have to get that next job. The spec you're writing has to sell because you have a house payment and all these other things. You can't look at it like that. And you must be able to weather the slow periods, like I said, of a career. These ups and downs, you don't want them to shake you out of the business. You want to stay in the game. The money isn't always as glamorous as one would think. And you need to be able to live on it until your next job. And if not, you'll have to go back to your day job or do something else instead of screenwriting or while you're screenwriting. And so over the long haul, it's best to live a simple life so you can live out your passion of screenwriting. And the key is low overhead. You don't want to blow your first big script sale on a car and a house and then you don't work again for 5 years, right? Now, if you're considering a screenwriting partner, you have to understand that it's not only a business relationship, but it's a creative relationship. And you're both going to sink or swim by your choices. And you have to really ask, do you have a similar work ethic? Now, I had a screenwriting partner for 7 years once, and we were very serious about what we did. We had the same creative sensibilities, and it was a pleasure. It was a joy because we were good friends outside of the work. And do you have the same professional attitude about your careers? That's important. When the going gets tough, is your writing partner going to give up and say, I'm going to do something else, and that leaves you hanging and the project in limbo or destroyed? So you have to talk about these things before you just say, oh, we're going to write a script together, because now you have somebody else involved. You also have to consider you split the income, usually 50-50. So let's say you sold that $90,000 spec that I talked about. You're each making $45,000 a piece, but then after taxes and blah, 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 you don't end up with much money after the fact. So you do have to share the money. That's a consideration. And are you both willing to compromise? You know, the famous George Costanza pitch meeting on Seinfeld. He goes in and he goes, no, we're not changing anything. And, you know, you have to have these discussions before you go into a meeting that you're on the same page, you know, and like I mentioned before, you will succeed or fail as a team. I mean, I had written a spec that sold before I had a writing partner. I had a solo screenplay, but the manager and the agent that we had would only sell us as a partnership, because they said it doesn't matter that you sold a script separately. They want to know what you guys do together and what you're feeling, your tone, and the voice of your screenplay as a partnership. So you sink or swim. It can be a great experience or it can be a nightmare. So really seriously consider if you're going to take on a writing partner for a long-term basis or just one screenplay. Now, what to do between projects? Like I mentioned before, it's that rough period when you turn in a script and you're waiting for notes and you twiddle your thumbs and you pace and it'll drive you crazy because no one's going to read it as fast as you'd like and get back to you. Sometimes it takes months. Even a contract, when you have an assignment job, can take a month to go back and forth between business affairs and your attorney. So what do? You keep a daily journal of your observations, because screenwriters always have to observe the world. Write down bits of dialogue that you hear. Just always be aware and present. You can watch and study movies. Bad movies, good movies, classics. I would suggest, if you haven't seen most of the classic films in Hollywood, you start doing that and study them. Read books and other screenplays. This is important. Books about screenwriting, about the film business, and also screenplays from your friends or scripts that have been produced into major motion pictures. Read. This is how you're going to learn. Attend workshops, lectures, online courses, go to museums, art openings, go to plays, even concerts. Anything that's creative and is going to keep you in that creative mindset, you know, where you're constantly looking at different ideas, you know, and being inspired. Attend a film industry networking workshop. That's also good, you know, because you can see like-minded people. Help other writers with notes. This is also important, a part of giving back. But avoid too much time away from any writing. You know, sometimes the longer you stay away, the harder it is to come back, you know, to sit down and structure your life and start doing pages again and getting excited and inspired with passion. So write something, a journal, poetry, whatever it is, but be creative. And then plan your next career moves. This is vitally important too. You have to look at the bigger picture, not just the script you're working on. How does it fit into your career goals? What are you trying to do with this screenplay? Is it just a fun project, or you're actually trying to get it made or get you representation with an agent or manager? You know, jot down a list of your goals and achieve them. Now, you need a solid professional approach to your career with a business plan. I find too many screenwriters don't look at their career like a business. You have to treat it as such. So I call it the triple play. You need a new pitch and a log line. All the time. You need to be working on pitches and log lines for other scripts that you haven't written yet. You need a completed script that is in fantastic shape and ready to go. You're completely happy with it and it can represent you in the best way. And you need one or two of those out there in the marketplace at all times. And you need a new idea. You need to be working on a treatment for your next screenplay or synopsis. You have to be juggling many projects at once like this. You just can't focus on one screenplay and then wait. You know, I've been guilty of this early on in my career, where I write one screenplay and I send it out and I wait, and then I get terrible feedback and it doesn't sell, and I'm like, so now what do? You know, you have to keep as many projects juggling at once. And I'm talking about TV pilots, web series, feature scripts. You can't just focus. You know, if you're not doing well with your feature screenplays, you keep hitting a wall. Maybe try some other type of writing, you know, to open up the opportunity. One script's not going to do it, as I told you before. It won't get you far, but 3 will. You open up the opportunities. And agents love writers who have a solid body of work that's ready. They don't like a one script wonder and then they're going to send you out to a meeting and you're going to have nothing to follow it up with and you're not working on anything else. They want to see that you're proactive and you take your career seriously and you have a business plan for it. That's why you have to treat your writing as a business, basically you incorporated. Nobody's going to push you like you can. And that's the hardest part about being a writer, because we spend a lot of time alone and we have to create the projects alone, unless you're working on a professional level. And you got to keep yourself on track every day. That's why if you have a checklist and you stick to it and you can see results, 1 or 2 things a day that you're doing to push your career, toward your end goal, which is to sell something and be hired as a writer and only do that for a living. That's the ultimate goal. So approach your career like it's a business. And I think I mentioned before, Hollywood has this weird time warp. They do business on their own time, not your time, not my time. So we want everything to happen overnight, but it doesn't. This is where patience is going to come into play. Practice patience, right? Everyone's busy and nobody cares about your screenplay. They don't. They only care if they hired you to write the script on assignment and you have a deadline. Then they love your script and care about it. But otherwise, money makes it real. Talk is cheap in Hollywood. Everyone, it's free and easy to say that they're interested, or I'm going to get back to you, or, empty promises, good intentions. Hollywood's filled with this. So take the pressure off of having to sell your screenplay. That's an immense amount of pressure. Don't put yourself into a corner where you have a ton of bills, you hate your job, and you're looking for your next spec to revolutionize, your life, to change your life overnight, because it's not going to happen that quickly. Rarely does it happen. Hollywood schedule's not yours. Like I said before, it's not mine. It works on the weird time warp, which is a long time. As I mentioned before, even a simple contract can go back and forth. A recent contract of mine for an assignment job went back and forth between my attorney for about 3 weeks. And then there was a holiday and someone went out of town and their business affairs, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I can't even start writing until the thing is signed. Contract, And another important discipline is keeping the intimate details to yourself. Because during this time warp, if you start talking about, oh, my script is at this company and that company and this one, and then they don't respond accordingly, and then they respond with, we are going to pass on your script, thank you. You've already told a bunch of people in the world about this great news, and then you have to tell them about the bad news. So just avoid it. Keep the intimate details to yourself. And that goes for when you're working on a script. You can say, I finished the screenplay, that's fine. But don't talk about the intimate details, because there are naysayers out there who don't want to see you succeed. And they're going to thrive on hearing bad news. And also, they're going to look at you and say, well, you were just blowing smoke, pontificating about things that weren't really happening. No, you were talking about real things, but it's a tough business, and many things don't happen. So don't expend that energy. Keep the intimate details to yourself. Now, the screenplay. It lives or it dies by 1,000 cuts. So now we talk about the actual screenplay. As I mentioned before, you have to follow professional industry format. This is vitally important to show that you know what you're doing. Courier font, 12 point, nothing else. Basically 100, maximum 110 pages. I received a screenplay recently to consult on, and it was 145 pages. And I was like, what are you going to do with that? It's way too long. It's like a script and a half. Limit to about 100 pages. Less is more on the precious page. You'll learn that, because if you're overwriting, you're going to have a long screenplay. And also, it's not a novel, and that's going to lead to micromanaging, and it's going to reflect poorly upon your ability as a writer, but also on the project's success. And what you write about is as important as how you write it. So you really have to ask yourself before you start a new spec, why am I writing this? Is it an idea that I'm passionate about? Am I trying to sell this as a Hollywood tentpole summer movie? You have to really think about, why are you writing this particular story? Many times I read a screenplay from my consulting service, and I think, why did the writer pick this subject? Why did they write this screenplay? So you really have to ask yourself before you sit down and really commit your time and energy, why are you writing the screenplay? Why? And it's a good question to ask. Now, it's also important to be able to create a solid log line for your screenplay, because that's going to represent it, in many areas without them having to read it, because no one wants to read in this business. So they read the log line and they can immediately tell if it's something they're interested in or they're not. So the number one rule is you have to be creative. And it's the who, what, where, when, and how of the script, preferably under 40 words in a few sentences. And it involves the main character, the goal, and the force that stands in the way. Basically, that's, what happens to the character, what's the most important moment in the screenplay. You can also leave off the ending and leave it as a surprise, so maybe they'll want to read the screenplay. I wrote a log line for a comedy that I wrote years ago. When a down-on-his-luck French fry vendor is mistaken by Nepalese monks as the reincarnation of their High Lama, he accepts a financial offer from the U.S. government to rule their kingdom, only to discover the job is for life. So that gives you kind of an understanding of what the movie's about, where it could go. So a solid log line is an extremely important tool to helping sell your screenplay. It represents the screenplay in a few sentences. Now you have to be careful who reads your screenplay. I used to be guilty of this. I would give my script out to anyone to read at any company, and that's not always a good idea, because bad studio coverage can harm your script and your reputation. When your script gets covered by a production company, it goes into a database, and it can be accessible to other people without even reading your script. So, keep it close to your vest. And everybody says, oh, let me read your script. That might not be a good idea to have it out in too many places. Now, you keep track of your script with a submissions log. The company you sent it to, the date, and who your contact person there is, so that you have a record. You just can't give it out to everybody and not keep track of it. And if you need help, you should pay for coverage from a professional screenplay consultant. Unless you have writer friends in the business who can read your script and you trust their opinion. And then you protect your script always by registering it with the WGA, or you can go to the copyright office. I think that's a little much, because if you sell your script, you're going to have to assign the copyright over to the production company, and then it becomes a work for hire. So you can just protect it by registering it with the WGA. I think it's $20 for non-members and $10 for members. Now watch out for the warning signs of an amateur screenwriter. Your screenplay's cover is incorrect. It's colored. It has giant font. This is a dead giveaway that you're an amateur. Your screenplay has misspellings and you don't know format. This will give you away every time. It's overwritten with confusing descriptions. The script is too long. And the screenwriting is not visual. It's a visual medium, so you have to write visually. You have to be able to read the screenplay and see it in your head. The words have to leap off the page. They have to be action, vibrant, visual. Or if you're using specific camera angles and shots and directing the scenes on the page, this is a dead giveaway of an amateur screenwriter who doesn't have enough experience or knowledge to realize that this is not what you do. Your characters have no descriptions, or you have too many characters. I consulted on a script once that every scene, I'm not kidding you, had a new character. There are probably 40 characters in the movie. I couldn't keep track of them all. Maybe your scenes are too melodramatic and overuse cliches. This is something that is a dead giveaway. And your dialogue's just bad. Too much exposition and no subtext. Everyone says what they mean, and it's bad. Or the script is poorly executed. The idea is actually better than the screenplay. That's not what you want. You want an amazing idea that was turned into an even better screenplay. So there are telltale warning signs if you're still an amateur. And I mean amateur in the fact that you haven't risen to writing at a professional level. So be aware of these things. And finally, the title. You see your name in lights. You see your name on the screen. If a movie's co-written, you see the ampersand, and. If they're separate writers, meaning one was fired and then another writer came on to finish the screenplay, you see the AND. Written by, it means it's an original screenplay. If you get the one credit written by, that means you're the only writer on the project and it was most likely an original screenplay or your original idea. Screenplay by, means that the work was from another source, meaning a story, a book, a newspaper article. So there was a source material before the screenplay rather than just an idea that was created. And then if you see story by, it's either a demotion or the writer did the treatment only. One of the writers gets story by credit, another writer wrote the actual screenplay. And trust me, there's nothing quite like seeing your name on the big screen or the small screen. So keep working at it.